First item tonight is one that I indicated to you following the presentation of the CREC audit, that I would respond with those things that I think we could accomplish relative to the priority recommendations in the audit during this school year. So basically the period now between January and July of 2016. So I'm going to review this with you for the benefit of the public, and hope it represents our first significant and tangible progress on addressing the CREC recommendations. Now, in context, this is what I believe we can accomplish during the course of the rest of this school year. Obviously, this is going to be a 3-year process, which runs parallel to the strategic operating plan of the district during that period of time. So, item number 1 is to conclude a search for a chief of pupil services, which will report to the superintendent. And as you know, this represents the upgrade of that position. It represents a greater accountability of the superintendent for special education, having the chief of pupil services as a direct report, and the ability to support that person in the many difficult decisions ahead that have to be made in order to right this ship. CREC is in the final stages of the search process. At some point, I hope in early February, I'll be able to report to you on where we are and hopefully the candidates that we are most interested in. I will tell you, though, at this point that this has been a difficult search. There is both a state and national shortage of folks that are qualified to be Director of Pupil Services, and there are open vacancies all over the state in this particular role. Nonetheless, I think we remain confident of our ability to attract a top person who has knowledge of special education at an expert level, but also is a strong leader and able to accomplish difficult goals over the period ahead. Second issue was commented on earlier today. This is the planning and implementation of the centralization of the inclusive preschool classes at the Roosevelt Center effective September 2016. I think we have to look upon this, and every glass can be viewed as half full or half empty. We have to look upon this as a half full situation. My understanding is that there is no change in the plan, which is, by the way, the responsibility of the city, as you know, but no change in the plan that was developed a year ago and is finally being brought to fruition and out to bid. It has always called for 6 classrooms. It is a state-of-the-art facility. There are observation rooms, there are rooms for related services, and it does require an administrator on site. And we will be taking our early childhood director, Pamela Jefferson, and stationing her there for the administration of that facility. And that is because we only run 3 other preschool classes, right? And this is the majority of our preschool classes. And so, of course, our director should be stationed there and providing that service, and we should not hire another administrator in order to do that. If it is, these classes are supposed to operate on a ratio of 18:1. 9 of the children in each session being special education students and 9 of the students being regular education students. And that is the state guideline for these classes as well in other parts of the state. In addition to that, these students have, in many cases, a large number of related services, aides, ABAs, and so on. And we will have more space for all the adults as well as the children at the Roosevelt Center. In the event that we enroll, we will have to have other classes in other schools. Now, as you know, this is a challenge because one of the benefits of consolidating the preschools is it gives us a little bit, just a little bit of breathing room in our existing schools so that we do not over-enroll. So this will have to be managed carefully, but clearly it will provide a step forward and a more efficient way as well of offering this service to both special education and inclusive and typical preschool students. It was alluded to tonight that we are having difficulty getting typical students to enroll, families of typical students to enroll, and that is true. And it is likely that next year we will have to drop the tuition requirement for the typicals simply to get enough students to provide that typical environment for our special ed students. In many cases, this kind of class does not work for a working parent because it's a morning session or an afternoon session, and most working parents will want a full day preschool. But again, there are a number of things that have to be done, planned, implemented, changed in order to make this work in a way that will benefit the most students, and that is an achievable goal for us in the next few months. Third task or goal would be, in partnership with current providers, to return students to Norwalk in 3 outplaced classes for 2016-17. And these would be specifically 2 secondary ED classes to Norwalk High School and 1 elementary autism classroom to Wolf Pit School. Now, currently, the only available classroom in the entire district at the elementary level is this classroom at Wolf Pit School, okay? We're at virtually 100% capacity. But this is a suite. It's a smaller room and a larger room that would lend itself very nicely to this program. We are going to, in order to phase into this, we're going to return these classes and have them run by the current providers, the current outside placement providers. And then they will transition over the course of a year or two to our staff as we can train staff, hire staff, and be able to take over this fully. So initially we'll have a savings in transportation and some tuition savings, and then a more realized tuition savings. More than that, we think we can provide a higher quality of program and one that exists in the community in which the children live. Item 4 is to request a desk audit of IEPs from the Connecticut State Department of Education. Now, I spoke to the board about this early on as we were awaiting the CREC audit. I have held off on this, and I will hold off on it until we have a chief of special services in place, because once this desk audit becomes known, there will be a mountain of work that has to be addressed and directed in order to improve the IEPs. You had a glimpse of this through the CREC audit. They audited a handful of IEPs, a selective sample of IEPs. And you'll recall that they found that approximately half of them were not in compliance, okay? So we would expect that finding on a broader scale from the State Department. And they also found, based upon their rubric rating scale of quality IEPs, that the vast majority of our IEPs, some 90%, were written at the lowest level of quality. So this is going to require a tremendous amount of work to bring this up to standard, and I hope that at the point we are faced with it, we will be fully staffed in our special education department. Fifth is to improve a system of financial controls. This will involve all district-level expenditures and contracts being approved by the Chief of Special Services. The Budget Director will meet bi-weekly with the Chief of Pupil Services to assess and project budgets. Dr. Michael Cicchetti is going to perform these roles until a new chief joins the district, and so that this process can be initiated immediately. In fact, we are in process of initiating this currently. Number 6, and now we are looking ahead to what we can plan and implement this year to take fruition in the next school year. And that would be to plan and implement an elementary school demonstration and training site, which offers a full continuum of services in 2016-17. Now, as you know, the basic finding of the CREC audit is that we have a service delivery model that is heavily dependent on individual services, and mostly paraprofessional services, aides and ABAs. What we need to do is to create a full spectrum of professional services. We need more teachers, fewer paraprofessionals, we need more teachers, and we need more steps in the spectrum. Ideally, over the next 3 years, we will have, at least in each feeder pattern, a full continuum of services existing, so that a student could be placed at various levels of the SRBI process based upon their needs. And we will have a service delivery model for each category of special education student. This will be a more expensive undertaking. It will require the addition of a number of teaching positions, but we have to get to the point where we can do it somewhere that is observable and can serve as a demonstration and can serve as a training site for others in our district as we seek to expand it. Number 7 involves combining and integrating each high school with feeder middle schools for development of a consistent continuum of service. The issue at the secondary level is not so much the absence of a continuum of services. We actually have a greater continuum of services at the secondary level than we do the elementary level. It's the consistency. The same services do not exist middle to high school and vice versa for students to make a smooth transition. But again, that is a doable goal, at least in planning in the next several months. Number 8 involves reconstitution of our special education department. People, positions, roles, and responsibilities to create the capacity to accomplish all priority recommendations of the CREC Special Education Review during the term of our strategic operating plan, 2016 to 2019. I'll be addressing some of these issues with you in executive session this evening, but this will be this is going to require a level of expertise and leadership that we perhaps have not had before in order to accomplish these goals. Number 9 is to establish the extra duty position of compliance and quality case manager in all elementary and middle schools beginning in 2016-17. You will recall that in this last contract negotiation with the NFT, there was agreement of the parties to do this, to accomplish this. We are the only school district our size that I know of that does not have a person at each school that is responsible for case management of student IEPs. This is why we address situations like we did at the beginning of this year at Nathan Hale, where there's a class of 10 and then there's a class of 40, and no one could anticipate the class of 40. And here you have the poor teacher who has this over-enrolled class. Case management means that there is a lead teacher in each school that looks at each student's IEPs and ensures that there is staff available to meet the IEP. This is integral, critical to our ability to actually meet IEPs and not have 50% of them out of compliance. We also need the Chief of Special Services to have a person in each school that they can communicate with in terms of bringing about changes, upgrades, and improvement in our services. This is very similar to the relationship that we've created for Dr. Connor with the CSIDs in the elementary schools. So they meet with him monthly. They are trained by him. They are implementing things in the curriculum. This is the same kind of relationship that these case managers would have with the Chief of Special Services. So in most districts, this is an extra duty position. It involves some release time and some additional compensation. Sometimes it involves additional days, compensated days of work. And we would negotiate this compensation with the NFT. Both I and President Jordan have appointed a negotiating committee to do this. We think it can be done in a couple of sessions. And essentially, we have a commitment of the parties to do this in a reasonable way. We have examples from many districts in terms of how this is done and how it is compensated in other districts in the state. Number 10 is to improve our capacity to develop, implement, and communicate 504 plans and the use of adaptive technology beginning in the next school year. Now, it was pointed out to us through the CREC audit that we have been considering 504 as a special ed issue. In reality, it is not. It is a civil rights issue. It is an issue of access based upon adaptations in the environment that allow a student to access a full education. And adaptive technology is also a big part of this. The notion here is to assign this work and this position, which it requires, to our technology department. And this individual would be involved not only in working with families to develop 504 plans, but most importantly, communicating them as a child goes to the next grade or goes from elementary school to middle school or middle school to high school. That's been a major weakness in our system, with large numbers of parents reporting that they go to the open house and the new teacher knows nothing about the 504 plan. And so this is going to require monitoring and also the coordination of a large amount of adaptive technology that we are currently using and anticipate using more of in the future. Number 11 deals with creating the capacity to audit and manage our outside placements. And as you know, this has been the greatest area of growth in our school system, and we are, in fact, this year some $4 million over budget for outside placements. This role is to manage those, coordinate shared services with other districts. Quite often you can go in with other districts to transport students to the same place, facilitate the return to district when appropriate of students. And this includes the large number of DCF and court placements that we also have. Right now, with no one visiting our outside placements, we do not know when we pay $100,000, $200,000 for an outside placement. We don't even know if the student is receiving the services that we're paying for, because no one is there checking on it. So that's part of the audit function, is to visit these schools, make sure students are getting what the district is paying for. Coordinating shared services to the extent possible, and establishing a relationship with the parent such that when the district is able to offer something in the district that would better meet the student's need, you have a relationship with the parent who has to sit down and agree to this at a PPT meeting. And right now, many of our families who are in outside placements are simply out of sight and out of mind. And the longer they have no relationship with the district, the more estranged they are from us, and the more difficult that process will become. Now, I would call your attention to number 12, which is the final aspect of this plan. This is something that Mr. Meek, as chairman of the Finance Committee, and Mr. Lyons, as chairman of the board, we have had discussions with our mayor, city council president, regarding this. I am going to request of the city of Norwalk, from their fund balance, the establishment of a transitional special education development fund of $1.2 million a year for 3 years for the period 2016-17 through 18-19. This fund would be used exclusively for the purpose of implementing the priority recommendations of the CREC audit to transition from over-reliance on one-on-one paraprofessional and contracted services to a professional service delivery model for each classification of student need and a full continuum of scientifically research-based interventions. The fund would be used to develop new roles, programs, and systems, and provide training and development to special ed staff at all levels to improve the scope and quality of specialized instruction. Items 6 through 11 on this list are largely dependent on the establishment of the fund in 2016-17. We have grappled with the issue of how to make the transition from where we are to where we should be with a full continuum of services. And the dilemma is we have to establish that continuum of services before you can phase out the one-on-one services and the contracted services. So you have to have something to offer first, which is why we need a development fund, which is also why it can be transitional, because as we establish these things, students will come out of their current plans and into a plan that is better. But it will take a period of several years in order to be able to do this and really right the ship. So, the mayor has expressed his commitment to trying to find a way to do this. The city has, as you are probably aware, a very large, very healthy fund balance currently. It's projected to grow by several million in the next year as well. And this would be a better alternative than simply trying to fund these improvements out of the operating budget, which is already perhaps as high as it can go at the 3.9 level to begin with. But it is just not possible to do these things and build the new structure without making at least a transitional investment that over time, where over time we can transition our current expenditures to those things. So that is our best thinking on how to approach this. Again, a number of these recommendations can be done and will be done in the accomplished in the immediate future. Others rely on a great deal of planning for the next school year, and still others rely on an infusion of transitional resources so that we can begin this transition over the course of the next year to be in a better place. I will stop at that point and just ask the board if they have any questions about any of the items I've mentioned.
Ms. Mosby?
Number 12, where you and the mayor and the board chair and I guess you two, Mr. Meek, met and you had a conversation on I guess tapping into this development fund for the next few years. I'm curious as to find out, is this being relayed out to the public, the taxpayers, all those people out there who like to know what's going on with their money, that we're thinking about, tapping into this fund? Is there some type of message that is going out there to the community so that they know what's going on? Because we just sat there and we're putting in for, I know, 3.9, budget, and then I know we're looking at trying to resolve some of these CREC problems. But I think that the more we're transparent to the public and let them know what's going on, I think it'll be more acceptable to them if they know, instead of just, a few people deciding on this. Because as you know, our board is funded by the taxpayers, and we need to sit there and start to have some consideration for them as well, as well as parents, and everyone. I think, I believe, and I strongly believe still to this very day, that everybody should be at the table, and we can listen and hear what they have to say, and then we can make a better case as to why we need this for our children, and then it'll be more acceptable out there in the public, instead of us walking out this room and, dealing with the public who feels that they've been they've been left out. So I'm just curious, is there something like, meetings or conversations or something that's going to be going on to let, the public, community, taxpayers know that we're looking at additional funding as well, and that these are the benefits of this?
So this is the first public discussion of this. And obviously, we would not have those discussions without this going to the Board of Education first. I would also emphasize that this is a request because we cannot find another way to do this without making some initial investments up front and providing an alternative, a better alternative from which we can transition our current services. We can't transition our current services to nothing and then wait until there are enough students available that we can offer something. That's the dilemma of this. So this is a request. Now, I don't know, the city, in its wisdom and through the work of its finance director, they may have a better alternative. What I'm telling you tonight is that we need some transitional funding mechanism in order to do this. We are also aware that an advantage to the city of using fund balance would be that it does not contribute to the minimum budget requirement for us for the future. This is from the city's perspective, and that it does not impact the tax rate in a way that an increase in our operating budget does. But again, there may be other ideas on this. There may be better ways to do it. I'm simply pointing out that it's my recommendation that a development fund that sunsets in 3 years, that provides us with the ability to create a structure that we can transition to and repurpose from our current expenditures is what's necessary. Now, you'll remember in the CREC audit, they did not feel we were spending more money than other districts in special education. They felt we were spending it on the wrong things. We had an over-reliance on one-on-one services. We had an over-reliance on contracted services and outside placements. And we did not have a full continuum of professional services, and we did not have a service delivery model for each category of special ed. So, our challenge is to try to create that, and I think we need help in getting over that hill. This did not occur in the last several years. This took a long time to occur, right? And it falls to us to fix it, to do something about it, and to make it better. And I would hope that we would have the support and cooperation of our city government and all segments of the community in attempting to do that.
And that's where I was going.
But I think once there is a plan or at least a proposal that's acceptable to the city, then that could be communicated,
Right.
To
needs to know what's going
to the
on.
community.
For them to buy into something, then you need to put it out there and let them know.
Any other questions, Mr. Meek?
Just comments, actually. The idea of tapping into a fund balance been socialized within the last few weeks over the holidays, and as Dr. Adamowski said, you're hearing about it tonight. The question really boils down to an insourcing versus outsourcing question. We looked at the costs in this area over the last 4 years. They grew at some like 60% in 4 years. So what do? Status quo is potentially 4 years from now, we're 60% above where we are today. And if you think we can't afford it now, we definitely won't be able to afford it in the future if we don't start making structural changes to bring the things back in-house that make sense. So this is an effort to do that. Is it going to happen? You know, it's a fluid situation. It's in development. But this is our best idea going forward to curb these costs. And this is not an epidemic, even though we're spending the same amount of money. This is not just in Norwalk. This is everywhere. Special ed costs are skyrocketing everywhere. So we need to do smarter things in-house, cut those costs down, or else 4 years from now, it's really going to start cutting into the entire district. As much as it is right now, it'll be exacerbated if we don't start trying to take in some of these things.
And I do understand that, because I know our costs are off there, and I, number one advocate for years, been saying that we are off, you know, but I'm just trying to focus on, yes, the communication part of it. We need to sit here and work on how to tighten that and make that better for getting this out to the public. That's all. I'm not saying that, you know, this is not the way to go. What I'm saying is that we need to be able to communicate this better to the public so they know what is actually going on, happening, because on top of this, that we need to find out what kind of accountability structure or something that we're putting in place that's going to monitor this to make sure that this is happening, because we seem to keep coming to the table for the same thing, and we keep going more deeper and deeper into the hole, as you said, over the last few years, and your projection is saying it seems that it's going to still keep going. But we need to make sure that we're communicating this to the people, and that we have some type of accountability or something put in place that we can sit there and monitor it to make sure that this is going to definitely help our children.
On the accountability issue, as you know, Mr. Lyons has appointed an ad hoc board committee under the leadership of Dr. CREC for the express purpose of monitoring our implementation of the CREC audit recommendations. So I think we will be strong on that point. On the communication point, I think we will need to be on the same page as the city in terms of how to accomplish this, and then, you know, go out and be able to communicate that.
Ms. Harris?
I'm just curious, do we know what year 1, year 2, and year 3 looks like in the development plan? And as the plan progresses, what happens to the paras, to the paraprofessionals?
Well, for example, if you know, you have a teacher, right, or more teachers, and you can establish a full continuum of services, as opposed to the partial one that we have, there will be less of a demand for one-on-one services. And keep in mind, you know, our special ed aides, while, you know, we have many dedicated people who work very hard, they are untrained. They have never received training, and they are not in the position that a trained, certified teacher is in terms of meeting a student's needs. So yes, there would be a gradual transition. Now, we won't give that up entirely. There will be students who will need one-on-one assistance during the course of the school day, just to be able to navigate the school in some cases. But certainly there'll be less of a reliance on one-on-one services. There'll be less of a reliance on outside placements. When we have an outside placement, in many cases it represents a failure of the school system to meet a need somewhere on the spectrum. And you know, many of the schools that we are paying very high tuitions to, they are not doing anything magical that we could not do. And again, in an environment that is more supportive and closer to home.
Okay, so basically we will let go of paras as the plan progresses?
You could say that as teachers are added and other professional services, there will be less of a need for paraprofessionals in one-on-one models.
And do we know what year 1 looks like, or are you still working on it?
Well, year one would be items 6 through 11
Okay.
on this list. At least that's what I think we can accomplish.
Shalom, are you done?
Yes, thank you.
Dr. Peppercorn?
Yeah. So, question number one, based on the timeline from January to July 2016, I'm sorry, not question number one, recommendation number one, concluding the search for the chief of special services, that can feasibly conclude in July, correct?
No, I'm hoping it's concluded much earlier than that.
Okay.
The original timeline called for CREC to give us candidates by the end of this month.
Okay.
Now, again, this is a difficult search. So I'm hoping that within a limited number of very highly qualified candidates that represents a national search that, we will have the person that we need without going further. If we need to go further, we will. But I'm hoping that, if a decision can be made in February, that, given 60 days notice, we could have somebody on board in April or May.
And just, I have a follow-up question. The numbers 6 through 11, they will be fluid, so whenever the chief is hired, these recommendations will be implemented on a continuum?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
with the exception of 9, which we're, committed to
Right.
in terms of contract negotiations.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Kasimis?
Sure. Question number 8. You're looking to reconstitute positions, the roles, responsibilities. Today, you're recommending for appointment 2 administrators in special ed. Do you feel that's a little premature or putting the cart before the horse?
No, we need to establish, first of all, we need to continue work that's underway. Okay, so we can't just leave positions open, right? And secondly, I think we want to get to a point where we have a highly qualified staff in place at the time that the chief enters the picture, with possibly one position, which would be the succession position, left open to be selected by the new head.
So their roles will remain the same?
The role of a special ed administrator is generic in the sense that you are supervising the special education process in a number of schools. The way we organize that will be different. And I'll be bringing you at some point in the future an org plan that would illustrate this. For example, relative to number 7, we feel that supervision of the secondary schools should be combined in each feeder pattern, middle schools and high school. Those are 2 of the 5 positions, right? You could then make the argument that another 2 of the 5 positions should deal with the feeder elementary schools to each high school. And then we have, in addition to that, which we cannot afford or cannot budget for in our regular budget, is this 504 and outside placement positions, which we need the development fund for. Now, the 504 position is probably something that has to be built into our budget over time, because again, this is not a special ed issue. This is a civil rights issue and an access issue. However, the CREC audit indicated that the outside placement position was transitional. We needed to do it for a number of years until we could establish the classes within district that we could and bring back the maximum number of students. There will always be some students whose needs will exceed what any school system can do. But, while we're making a start with these 3 classes, there are probably in the range of another 4 or 5 classes that could conceivably be brought back into our district over time.
Dr. Adamowski?
Yep.
I'd like to ask a question or a comment on number 9,
Yep.
The quality case manager. I know many of our districts or surrounding districts have case managers.
Yes.
Are we looking, and I think we discussed this a little bit about compensation because there will be obviously more work involved, Is this a 12-month or a 10-month position that we're looking at?
Well, depending on whose model you look at, there are some that are simply the teacher work here, right? There are others that will add a certain number of days to that, like 5 days or 2 days before, 2 days after. Generally, they have a little bit of time before or after school. We've had experience with that in other positions. Generally, there will be some release time. Many of the surrounding districts do a .2 release time. And you know, there is the possibility for additional monetary compensation as well. But this is an extra duty position
Yes.
among the many that we have in our collective bargaining agreement.
Okay, thank you.
This is just one that we have not had, and you're right, we are unusual in that we have not invested in this in the past.
Especially with the added responsibility in the CREC report. I think it's well needed. And we'll be sharing best practices with some of our other schools, like you mentioned, or other districts, I should say, that have case managers.
Yeah, we've looked at several,
Yeah.
including Stanford, and you know, again, lots of models to look at.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or discussions?
I just want to, pardon me for my question on the implementation. I see clearly here that you have January through July.
Well, that's okay. This is something that we are all getting our hands around, right? And we'll help each other, right?